Never before in human history have we been richer, more advanced, more powerful. Despite this, many feel overwhelmed by the growing issue of pollution. Modern society, as we have constructed it over the past century, is self-destructive. Virtually everything we do to make our lives easier, safer, and more comfortable is also damaging to the environment and ourselves, especially in developed countries such as the United States, where nearly 200,000 deaths every year are attributed to its air pollution, and which, despite being home to around 4% of the world's population, produces around 12% of its trash. Evidently, there is a problem here, and for decades, the country has struggled to find ways to solve it. A major talking point of these discussions is personal responsibility, how you should change your lifestyle to prevent pollution. And for decades, many have been convinced that this is something everyone is responsible for. Everyone must do their part to end pollution and save the environment, with slogans such as reduce, reuse, recycle being easily recognizable to most Americans, and many making efforts to reduce their own consumption or contribute to recycling programs. But is this truly the case? Recycling, for example, is not nearly as effective as many believe, despite the prevalence of recycling programs. As many as 90% of plastic products are not recycled. Despite this, corporations in the plastic industry have spent tens of millions of dollars promoting recycling since at least the 1980s. One must ask why this is and how these slogans and promotions are truly affecting efforts to address pollution. Good afternoon, my name is Miguel Farias-Arenas, and today I'd like to pose a question. How have corporate efforts to promote sustainability impacted consumption and pollution in the United States? In the context of pollution, sustainability refers to reducing one's consumption of goods and resources such as gasoline and electricity, or doing things such as recycling to counteract the production of waste. It is largely considered an individual practice by private citizens. But is the promotion of sustainability truly helping to counteract pollution? The simple answer is, it is not. Despite how it may seem at first, the promotion of sustainability and personal responsibility has done little to slow down or stop pollution in the United States, because it not only targets the wrong things, but also draws attention away from more effective solutions. First of all, the individual do-your-part approach to pollution, which many believe in, is not effective to begin with. As stated earlier, most plastic is not recycled. As you can see in this graph, around 3 million tons of plastic around 3 million tons of plastic out of around 30 million were recycled in 2015, while the vast majority was put into landfills. While this graph does not show what these statistics may look like now, looking at the other years shown up to 2000 shows that the proportion remains largely the same, since total levels of waste are also increasing. So we can assume that the proportion would remain honestly the same in 2023. Moreover, further research reveals that most plastic is not recyclable to begin with, meaning that whatever small contribution many people believe they are making by disposing of plastic in recycling bins is in fact not real. Efforts to reduce air pollution suffer from a similar problem. Research shows that the average American citizen, through their various regular activities such as driving and using electricity, is responsible for the emission of around 16 tons of carbon dioxide every year. While at first glance this may make one tempted to support the narrative of personal responsibility, it is important to look at the bigger picture. This average is significantly skewed, as further research reveals that around 100 specific energy companies are responsible for 71% of industrial carbon dioxide emissions. This means that even if every individual did everything in their power to reduce their carbon dioxide emissions, this would only reduce total emissions by less than a third. While this would be helpful, it would not be nearly enough to truly solve the problem. Far more so than private citizens, it is corporations who must do their part to end pollution. But when one listens to the messaging around saving the environment, this is not what is being acknowledged. In fact, most of the commercials and ad campaigns which seem to draw attention to the issue of pollution would have the public believe that it is entirely their fault and their responsibility. For decades, corporate ad campaigns have reframed pollution as an individual issue while themselves doing virtually nothing to help. For example, an ad campaign by the oil and gas company BP originally popularized the concept of the carbon footprint, with programs such as this carbon footprint calculator, which estimate how much carbon dioxide a user has emitted through a certain activity. BP is subtly shifting blame towards the individuals who consume their products, glossing over their own involvement in the emissions to avoid responsibility. And energy corporations are not the only ones using these tactics. As discussed previously, most plastics, even those put in recycling bins, are not actually recycled, yet the plastic industry has invested massively into promoting it regardless. Research reveals that in the late 20th century, people grew increasingly concerned about the accumulation of plastic waste, and consumers turned activists worked to draw attention to the problems of the plastic industry. In particular, the celebration of Earth Day saw numerous demonstrations against plastic manufacturers, as these activists created a tide of growing hostility towards the plastics industry into the 1980s and 1990s. Facing the possibility of federal restrictions on plastic, the industry sought to protect itself through careful PR work and advertising campaigns that encourage individuals to recycle and essentially do the work of reducing waste for them. Even though, as we now know, this was not truly accomplishing much of anything. In other words, in lieu of doing anything remotely helpful, the industry simply lied to the public, offering the Band-Aid solution of public recycling programs while knowing full well that recycling was not effective at the time and is still quite lacking even today. America's pollution problem is undoubtedly not the individual crisis that corporations have framed it as for decades. The narrative of personal responsibility in regards to pollution is perhaps one of the biggest and most harmful myths perpetuated in America, but dispelling it is key to truly solving the problem. As corporations continue to divert resources away from real solutions and towards distracting the public, people must remain vigilant in placing blame where it truly belongs. These are my sources. Thank you.
Right, two questions for you. First up, what information did you need before you began your research, and how did that information shape your research?
I needed statistics on how much waste and carbon dioxide America produces relative to how much is produced across the world. So how I said that America only has 4% of the world's population but produces 12% of its trash, and how much carbon dioxide it emits. That helped me like emphasize the importance of this issue, because America is one of the world's most significant polluters.
Okay. And if you had more time, what additional research would you conduct on this issue?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. If you had more time, what additional research would you conduct?
I would have likely tried to find more specific details on which corporations produce the most trash and which corporations contribute the most to carbon dioxide emissions.